Good afternoon. I am Steve Cummings with InTheCorner.net, and I am here today doing a first for the InTheCorner.net blog. I'm going to do a little video here on the day after the huge pay-per-view boxing event last night, headlined by Terence Crawford and Irail Madrimov. And like I said, it's the day after. I did not write anything last night. And in fact, I beyond laziness, I wanted to take a look back at the fight, which I've just done. And this was, of course, Terence Crawford. He's moving up to 154 after his huge win over Errol Spence last year. And here he is at junior middleweight, and he's fighting Madrimov, who's a guy that I knew basically nothing about. And the guy was 10-0 with a draw, but he was a title holder going into the fight last night. So, you can sell pay-per-view for stuff like that, and they've been selling it to us for a good long while. But this one was a little bit different. This one was part of the Riyadh season. We had probably I don't know, the most grandiose pay-per-view event we've ever had. Turki Al-Sheikh he's the guy that, he's got a huge title, advisor of the Royal Court under the rank of minister and the current chairman of the General Entertainment Authority. So, this guy swings a lot of weight, and he's been putting up a lot of money to get the big fights made. He's been around for about a year or so. And so we had this part of, an ongoing celebration called Riyadh season that takes place overseas. Well, he's bringing it to America, brought it to Los Angeles. So what we ended up having was an absolutely huge card. Went on, if you were there from the very beginning, it went on from 1:30 in the afternoon on the West Coast till, gosh, I can't remember how late it was. I mean, the Crawford and Madrimov started well after 9:30, 9:45, something like that out here. So it was way after midnight on the East Coast. So we're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the main event. We're going to talk about the other fights, and then we're going to talk about the whole spectacle that we saw last night. So I am going to start with Crawford and Madrimov. And Terence Crawford, as we know, came off, his most spectacular outing that he's ever had. And he finally got the credit he was long due, probably, by beating Errol Spence and just absolutely demolishing him a little over a year ago. And, Crawford's been around a good long while, and he's getting up there in age now. And he's 36 now. And if you look at his list of fights, he's got some big names out there, some decent names at the very least. He's got the Victor Postol, Henry Lundy, John Molina. And then, he's begging for a big fight. He needs to get in there and, get the big money fights. But we had our promoter wars that everybody, if you're watching this video, then I'm sure you're familiar with the fact that, some of these big guns won't fight each other because of the politics involved. So he fought Sean Porter, he fought David Avanesian, and he finally got the big money, big pay-per-view event with Spence, and he absolutely crushed Errol Spence. He looked, for all the world, like, everything, we couldn't really say for sure about his greatness, but it seemed like it was stamped at that point with that big fight, because Errol Spence had a pretty good resume, and he was undefeated himself. And then it's his path to that fight, meaning Spence, was there was a car crash, and it was in the aftermath. Spence doesn't look so good. He looks like he lost a one-sided event. So then, well, maybe is Crawford that great, or was Spence compromised? Okay, I say all that because a lot of my analysis for this Madrimov fight is gonna look back at Spence. I'm not gonna look back at, some of these lesser fights, and we can reference how he absolutely brutalized Kell Brook and how he overpowered Sean Porter. That is that is Terence Crawford showing his greatness against those guys. But we're going back, Sean Porter, we're going back 3 years, 2.5 years. Kell Brook, we're going back to November of 2020. So the most logical thing to do, and a big impact on the perception of last night's fight, is by looking back at Crawford's last outing against Spence Jr. And again, it was a flawless performance, and he came out of that, got all his flowers, was stamped right there, all his hard work. He became, shot right up to the top of the pound per pound list, which I absolutely detest and don't normally get involved in. But nevertheless, that's something everybody talks about. So he got his respect. He got his, he's now an all-time great, according to everybody. And he's already got 3 divisions where he's been a champion, so he moves up to grab a 4th title. And to me, this looked like taking on Madrimov 10-0, 10-0-1, and he just got the belt recently. This looked to me like Sugar Ray Leonard, moving up to fight Ayub Kalule, and then winning that title and then going right back down. Or maybe even later when Leonard went up and fought Donnie Lalonde. Sure, it's going to be a belt. It's a legit belt. All that stuff. But I thought this was I knew nothing about Madrimov, and shame on me, I could say. But, I bought this pay-per-view card, which I don't do too often, because it was just stacked with names. And even then, I wasn't really sure how it was going to play out. It was like almost every fight had a name that I was familiar with. The opponent, I don't know. So to break it down like this, the first 2 fights had a couple of Cuban fighters of note. And Andy Cruz was one of them. And he fought at lightweight. And he's 3-0 and being talked about as the next greatest thing. And the other one was David Morrell, and he fought at lightweight. And those were the first 2. There was actually 2 fights. If you watched DAZN, there were 2 fights prior to. But then I was on ESPN Plus, so the show for me started with Andy Cruz, and there was hardly anybody in this soccer stadium in LA. Cruz comes out there, they're just talking him up like he's, the greatest thing ever. And he had a really tough time with a guy named Antonio Moran. And he got wobbled and he didn't look all that good. However, he was able to close the show in the 7th round and he looked real good doing it. So Andy Cruz moved on. And, he had some questions, and that's what the pro career is about. He fought a guy that's 36-1 going into the fight. Andy Cruz is 3-0. And so, hey, he got shown a few things that he needs to work on. And I would say his defense, he needs to find out a way to not get hit by these by these guys that, anybody that's got any power. But anyway, Andy Cruz passed his test. People trashed him a little bit for, he's not as good as they're making him out to be. Well, I don't know that he's doing that. He's just fighting the fights. So then Morrell came out, and that didn't really go well at all. I don't think, as far as for Morrell. He got a decision, and, it just, he fought Hot Rod Kolachik, and, Morrell was 10-0, Kolachik was 29-2, and Hot Rod got him, man. Hot Rod kept getting him and, landing solid shots on him. And Morrell, you could see the flashes of brilliance. You could see he would all of a sudden, throw a series of combinations, and they were sharp and fast, and Hot Rod would have to, stop everything he was doing and defend himself. But for the most part, Morrell really didn't look that impressive. Got his decision, good for him. And then we had a couple of heavyweight bouts, and these, I know this is going to sound crazy, but the heavyweight bouts are kind of like what pushed me over the top to watch these, to buy the pay-per-view. We had a couple of big baby heavyweights that are out there, and for whatever reason, they both have the same nickname, and it became a sticking point sometime in the recent past. And the first one was Jared Big Baby Anderson. He was 17-0, guy with fast hands, and I kind of like him, and I believe he was expected to be, the best American heavyweight prospect, with the heavyweight titles all overseas for a while now, and nobody from America really making a dent. So he took on a guy named Martin Bakole, who was 20-1, and Anderson, he was doing his thing in the first round against this absolutely huge guy, Bakole, and this Bakole, I'm telling you, he dwarfed Anderson, and he had a really fast jab, like a super fast jab that did damage, and the old adage, the telephone pole jab, he had that, and he also had fast power punches that would come behind it. But Anderson was doing his thing. He was being the shorter, more mobile guy, and he was getting his shots in there, and all was well until right at the end of the round, Bakole got him with an uppercut, and Anderson was rocked, and Bakole hit him with a couple more shots and put him down hard in a corner. And by the time Anderson got up, he looked good. I was really surprised with that. He looked really good. And there was like 1 second left in the round, so nothing happened. So then they come out the next round, and man, it was just like the big man and the small man deciding to go toe to toe, and deciding to, I can't win this fight from the outside because his reach is too much. So Anderson kept getting in there, and he was doing okay. He was landing some shots and getting in and getting out, but then Bakole was just too much. He was I don't know. If you saw them facing off against each other, man, it was a tall order for Anderson, and so he made it okay. But in the, was it the 5th round? I think, and Anderson actually, I think he won round 3, round 4, something, I don't know. But he did okay, but it looked like trouble was brewing. It looked like this isn't going to last. And in the 5th round, he just got clocked. He went down twice, and it was, he got up, but he was in terrible shape. So Jared Anderson lost his undefeated record. He went to 17-1. Martin Bakole becomes a player in the heavyweight division. And, I think you can land shots on him, and I think somebody closer to his size could give him trouble. He's lost a fight already to, gosh, they kept saying his name last night, Michael Hunter. So he got TKO'd by Michael Hunter like in 2018, and then since then he's just been knocking guys out. Not big names on his resume. So, I don't know that Jared Anderson right now it's a big name. I don't know how big. Time will tell how big of a victory that was and how big of a name that is on his resume. So on we went to Andy Ruiz and Gerald Big Baby Miller. And the interesting thing here, Big Baby Miller had the fight agreed to with Anthony Joshua, but he failed a PED test, and Andy Ruiz stepped in and beat Joshua and became the champion for a brief while. And then, of course, Joshua beat Ruiz in the rematch, and Ruiz has done a whole lot of nothing since then. He hasn't fought hardly at all. So Miller, he's a really big guy, and he's fought well over 300 pounds most times. He came into this one at 305.5, and that's an indication that he worked really hard for it. Ruiz, same as always, had the big, jelly belly and all that, but man, he's got those fast hands. He's got a lot of power, and this thing was a pretty good fight. And it was, after the Bakole-Anderson matchup, it wasn't as much action. It was slower and more methodical, but the big shots kept coming from time to time. And they scored this one a draw, and I don't think anybody doesn't think Miller won. I mean, nobody looking at it on Twitter, listening to the commentary, where I normally see and hear stuff, everybody thinks Miller won. The crowd booed the decision. I think Andy Ruiz was pretty relieved to get that decision. Well, he didn't get a decision. It was a draw. There was one scorecard for Miller, and the other two were a draw, so it's a majority draw. So that's what you get. And then, all these hours into this event, we get the co-main, which is Jose El Rayo Valenzuela, who's 13-2, and he fights Isaac Pitbull Cruz, who's 26-2-1. And Cruz is a real well-known guy, and I think he sold a lot of tickets for this event. And he won the super lightweight title last time out against Raleigh Romero. And he's been in there with Yuriorkis Gamboa. He gave Tank Davis a pretty good fight where he lost unanimous decision, but really close on all three scorecards. So Pitbull, he's a tough customer in there, and I think it was expected he was going to win. And then especially when you look and see Valenzuela's record 13-2, not really impressive, but this was the fight of the night. This was just brilliant, and it was this is the classic, boxer versus puncher, whatever you want to call it. Isaac Pitbull Cruz, he comes forward, he brings pressure, he's got power. Valenzuela just, jab, movement, come back with some power shots, avoiding the rushes, and then giving Cruz something to slow him down, on his rushes. I just love, historically, I love the Sugar Ray Leonards, the Muhammad Alis, the Hector Camachos. I love the dancers, the movers that can do this against a scary opponent, against heavy pressure, and can still score and get their business done. So I really appreciated what Jose Valenzuela did, and he won a split decision. He got a couple of 116, 112s, and Pitbull got a 115, 113 in his favor. It was Valenzuela, and again, boxing being what it is, I appreciate what Valenzuela's doing. I feel like he checked all the boxes, and I gave him enough rounds to easily win the fight. I know there's the other school of thought out there is, his punches weren't as damaging. Cruz did more damage. And I don't think you can say this in this fight. I think Valenzuela gave him, he rocked Cruz somewhere along the line, which isn't easy to do, but he repeatedly, he would give the angles, he would get out of danger, and then he would come in, a lot of times he'd bring in uppercuts, and just a really skillful, intelligent fight by El Rayo. And so he's the new super lightweight champion. Crazy division down there. The titles change hands over and over and over. And that brings us to the main event, which is Crawford and Madrimov. But it doesn't bring us there, does it? So we're going to talk about in a minute. We had a good long while in between Valenzuela's win and Crawford and Madrimov getting going. And it was stuff. I just can't imagine stuff like this happening in a boxing event, but it happened. They had a brief concert by Eminem. They pulled a guy out of the stands and gave him a car. They inducted Turkey into one of the boxing Hall of Fames. I'm going to talk about all that in a bit here. Anyway, well after midnight on the East Coast, Crawford and Madrimov get going. And so this is a close fight, pretty close fight. Crawford got the win. I scored it for Madrimov while I was watching it. I just watched it again, and I scored it for Madrimov again, maybe a little bit closer. I'm looking at the judges' scorecards right now, and at the beginning, it really, unless I don't understand the color scheme, and I know I do, to me, Madrimov came out and did okay, and this is a Terence Crawford fight, so you know two things. Number one, he's going to come out righty and switch to lefty almost right away. Number two, he's going to lose the first round. And that's the way it goes. They talked about it on the broadcast. Everybody knows this if you watch Bud. He comes out, he doesn't do a whole lot, basically gives away the first round, watches everything. And because I believe, and I think a lot of people believe, he's such an intelligent, instinctful fighter, I think he just pulls in everything that he sees, tries a couple things, sees what the other guy's going to do. And then he comes out somewhere, it doesn't have to be a second round. It could be third, fourth, whatever. He comes out and he lets it fly, and he lets these guys, to me, Crawford lets these other guys like cook their own goose. They show him everything, and then once he's seen it, then he lets them do it, and then he counters, and he does all kinds of good stuff. Didn't happen in this fight for a good long while. Madrimov came out in the first round. They were physically, Madrimov had the size and strength advantage. Bud's athleticism and his supreme boxing skills. So, that doesn't have to be a problem with him. But Crawford did so little. And the last thing I have in my mind of him is him just working Spence over, up one side and down the other. And so as this fight goes on, he didn't fight like that hardly at all. He did it in little spurts, but it wasn't until the 11th and 12th rounds that he did full-on Terence Bud Crawford, you come at me, you're getting this, more aggressive. He didn't do that until the final two rounds, and he did it in those two rounds because he had to. I'm certain of that. So he laid back. And this is where, when the scores came out the way they were, a lot of people, you're watching this fight live, and that's why I watched it again today, with everything. I know what happened, and, I'm not wondering what the outcome is. You're watching this live, and Madrimov is clearly doing better than you thought he would, that finds its way onto people's scorecards. You might give him a round that he didn't win, but he did better than you expected against the great Bud Crawford. So I watched it again today, and it backed up what I saw last night. It really did. And I'm not the greatest judger of fights. I think I know what I'm looking at, and I know what's important and what's not. Madrimov would get some shots in there, get some good shots in there. Crawford wasn't as elusive as he normally is, and he didn't come back with his big stuff at the beginning hardly at all. And then when he did it later, we got this argument that kept coming up last night that, well, Crawford landed the more powerful shots and so on and so forth. I don't know, maybe. The punch stat numbers, I don't know. The punch stat numbers these days, I almost feel like those are just the same thing as judges. They're the same thing as announcers. It's somebody over there saying that was a landed punch, that wasn't. So anyway, as these rounds go on, Madrimov got the first two on my card, and I'm looking at the judges' scorecards, and they gave the first two to Crawford, and that makes sense to me, given that, well, if nothing really happens, you're probably going to say Bud, he's the big name here. But I saw it the other way. I saw Madrimov pressing the attack, Bud doing almost nothing. Got to give the round to somebody. I gave it to Madrimov. The third and the fourth I gave to Crawford. And I was in total agreement with Mannix at that point, and that never happens. I always look at his scorecard and go, what? But actually last night I think I had Madrimov up 3-1, and Mannix had it 2-2, and then I watched it today, and one of those Madrimov rounds I gave to Bud. So these guys, one guy had it, one guy had it 3-1. One guy had it 3-1 Bud. Another guy had it 3-1 Bud. They all had a 3-1 Bud. Okay. But they flip-flopped a couple of the rounds. Okay, so away we go. And something that happens here, Crawford's in the left-handed stance almost the whole fight. And Madrimov was getting there with a straight right hand. And that's textbook. That's what you're supposed to do against a southpaw. You don't jab your way in. That straight right hand is supposed to be the thing that start your offense, or at least you're going to have some success there. And he did that. Madrimov did that, not like over and over and over, but it was every so often he would pop them in there. And then he came with like wide, he hit Crawford with a couple of like looping left hands and stuff like that, spun Crawford's head around a little bit. And again, Crawford's doing this tactical thing, and I'm just waiting for him to let it fly, turn the tables. But over and over every round, a lot of them really close. And what I'm seeing and what a lot of people are seeing is Madrimov pushing the action to Bud analyzing and only coming back here and there. And I think the people that would say, well, yeah, Crawford landed the more meaningful shots, I honestly feel like you're looking for that. You're sitting there watching the fight, Madrimov lands, and you say, oh, that's nothing. And then Crawford lands, and you're saying, oh, wow, that was a great shot. And, I mean, I love Crawford. I wasn't really rooting against him last night. I was kind of rooting for Madrimov a little bit because, wow, that would be crazy if he beat Bud Crawford. But it was the kind of thing where I would have liked to have seen Madrimov win. If he didn't, then that's great. And I think Bud's one of the all-time greats, and that's fine, and away we go. His legacy continues to be built. I'd be perfectly happy with that. But as the fight went on and Crawford wasn't doing much, it's like some of these rounds I got to give them to Madrimov. And I'm not giving that round to Terence Crawford's resume. I'm just not going to give it to him because of who he is. So I think I had it in the second time I watched it just earlier today. After 10 rounds, I had it 7-3 Madrimov. And I completely understand if it's 6-4 and 5-5 would not be outrageous, but I just don't think so. I don't think you could do that. So 7-3 Madrimov, and then the bell rings for round 11, and Terence Bud Crawford enters the ring, and he comes in and he starts doing his thing, and very aggressive, going for it. And I wasn't paying attention in between rounds. I didn't hear what he was told. Buddy, you need a knockout. I didn't hear any of that. But he changed his whole posture, and he started taking care of business. And he did that in the 11th, and he did that in the 12th. On my card, that makes it 7-5 Madrimov. I would not be at all upset for 6-6. And I think 7-5 for Crawford. You can do it. I expected wide margins for Crawford, but I'm telling you, I think Madrimov won that fight. Now, one of the things that happened before this fight, when Turkey Ali Sheikh came into the ring, is he mentioned that he had already sent an offer to Canelo for a showdown with Crawford should Crawford win tonight. There's red flag right there. Crawford's going to win this fight unless he's completely worked over. So if he makes it to the bell and he wasn't embarrassed, then, I just can't imagine that they're going to let that big showdown go up in smoke. But actually, I think it did anyway. I think Crawford at 154 caused enough concern that I don't think there's any way he should think about going up to fight Canelo. And if Canelo does have that offer, I'm signing that thing like upon arrival. But so there's all that, and Crawford gets the decision, and I can't sit here and say, this is terrible like Eddie Hearn did. Eddie Hearn jumped up in the ring because one of the scores was 116-112. That's 8-4 Crawford, and there's no way in the world that happened. And so I understand that he's right about that. But this kind of this highlights a trend that I've been seeing in boxing lately. We've had all these things wrong with boxing my entire life. I've been watching boxing for more than 50 years. We've had bad decisions. We've had the big guys won't fight each other, all this stuff. And lately what I'm seeing is they'll get the decision right. I don't know. I'm trying to think of a fight recently, and I can't think of one, but I know it's happened repeatedly. The fight happens, the right guy wins, but the right guy wins 116-112, 115-113, and then the other card will be like 118-110 for the other guy. And I've been seeing that and I think there's one particular judge that was mentioned on the broadcast that has done that more than once. And so 116, 112, I think is pretty far off. But I say that. I say 116, 112 is off, but I'm okay with 115, 113 for Bud. I don't know. That's a tough one, because that's just flipping one round. But I think Madrimov won 7 of the 12. So yes, to say, no, he didn't win 7. He only won 4 rounds. That's where the problem lies. So there's all that. Terence Crawford, he's the winner. We had a whole bunch of big fights that were pretty fun. I say big fun, or big fights, but they were fun. And the heavyweights, I think that's smart. Put the heavyweights up there, and then when you get the explosiveness that you had in the Bacoli Anderson fight, that's how you do that. I think you should guarantee that something like that is on every card. It doesn't have to be the top of the card or the co-main, but make sure the fans get that kind of thing. Now I'm going to talk about the production, which was a little weird even from the get-go. They're at this soccer stadium in Los Angeles, close to downtown. It's where the Los Angeles, their pro soccer club plays. Pretty big place. Bazillion seats. And I know there were plenty of tickets available just like a week ago. Those opening fights, it really looked kind of crazy with absolutely nobody in the seats, like right on the floor or on the field. But yeah, I think that would have been a tough event to go to live, because I'd want to see all the fights. And so you're getting there when it's in the 90s in LA, which is hot, plus you're sitting in the direct sunlight. So a lot of people in LA, 90, it's tough on them. And it's 106 here today, and I'm used to it. But still, I think if you're sitting in the direct sunlight, I think that's kind of tough. And you got such a long ways to go. So there's that. Then when the sun goes away in Los Angeles, it gets, I wouldn't say cold, but it's a big change. And they mentioned on the broadcast that there was a cool breeze coming through that maybe was not just like a welcome relief. It was more, I don't know. I wasn't there, so I can't say, but they did mention it. So anyway, you got all this. You got, tons and tons of fights over a long period of time. I really appreciate that they put fighters that were somebody's. That's why I bought it. And I thought that was great. And I thought the pacing was really good. They went from fight to fight really well. And then after the Cruz Valenzuela thing, man, they dropped the anchor, and here we sat. And I don't know actually how long it was. Over an hour. I know Eminem, when he came out, I remember it was like 9:15 when he came out, and it was like 9:40 when he finished. That's 20 minutes right there. And then, they pulled a guy out of the audience, like I said before, and gave him a car. And that was a big old production. Turkey came up in the ring and, did whatever to present it to him. And all along the way, I say the pacing was pretty good, but those early fights, they kept going back to, they had Sean Porter and I think Kate Abdo were way over here in the corner of the stadium, and then they had a couple other people down by where the stage was that Eminem played, and then they had the ringside guys, and they would bounce back and forth. And I didn't get the feeling in between the prelim fights, I didn't get the feeling that we were being bogged down, and there were no commercials, which I have to say I appreciate that, which commercials are absolute travesty on a pay-per-view, but they've been happening. So they didn't happen last night, and that was great. But then this big huge delay. You had they gave away the car. One of the organizations brought Turkey up into the ring and then made him an honorary member of the Hall of Fame. Eminem does his thing. Then, boy, let's talk about the fight. We got this really big fight coming up. They do some of that. They come into the ring. We get 3 national anthems. Then we had a boxing match. I will say this. Last night, okay, I did it. I'm glad I did it. Not that big a deal. But I'm not doing it again. All right, I'm not, and the more fights may not be the way to go. I kind of have the feeling, with these fights coming from Turkey Ali Sheikh and his organization, I feel like we're going to do things his way. And everybody's lining up. Just look at the Hall of Fame thing. Everybody's lining up to tell him, oh, thank you. You're so amazing. So whatever he wants to do, I feel like we're going to do. But I hope he gets some feedback that was too much, And I saw people today saying that, like, during the main event, people were leaving, because the Crawford fight was not electrifying. It was tactical chess match. And, out here it was whatever time it was. It was after 10, which, if you've been sitting there all day, I think that's kind of tough. I was here, I eat pizza and sub sandwiches, and I don't know how many sodas I drank, and my bathroom was just right there. It was fine for me. I think for the home audience it was okay. I don't know what that would be like being there. If, like, say, if I was a reporter and I was there start to finish, I think that would be a tough one, honestly. As big an event as it is, and having access to these important people, I think that'd be a slog in my mind. But anyway, so like I say, the next go around, I'm really going to scrutinize how they put this thing together. And I'm, I think this one here, the main event wasn't the seller for me. I do want to see everything that Crawford does, but with these pay-per-views, I'll see him eventually. I just won't see it live, right? So, it wasn't so much him that did it. I mean, that was part of it. I'm not discounting it, but it was all the fights before that I said, okay, this is a good package. The next go around, I'm going to look at it a little bit more closely and think, do I have to see all these? I mean, this was good. We had people over, and people here left early. The people we had that came over, not all of them made it to the end, but. Yeah, it was fun. And for me, it was a good Saturday. I really enjoyed it. And my whole thing with boxing is the story continues. Okay, this happened tonight. What does that mean? What do we do next? Who's going up? Who's back to the drawing board? It's like Valenzuela, El Rayo. He's on his way to the stars. Jared Big Baby Anderson. He's regrouping and seeing if he can get his thing going again. Terence Crawford's in this weird, what do I do now spot. If he really does have the Canelo offer, man, I don't know about that. So anyway, stay tuned, to be continued. I'll be commenting as all this stuff plays out and the other events. And leave me some comments if you have anything to say about this huge fight card that we had last night.